Thank you very much for the introduction. So, it's been, because the time and different events changed, so I initially been planned to be extremely come in, talk, leave out immediately. And things a bit changed, so I'm here a bit longer with you. And the intention of today's presentation, which I wanted to, when we talk about digital transformation and digital changes, and how communities work today, how the media work today, we, in the National Reform Council, we partner with newly created think tank or analytics company Keystone Corporation in Ukraine. And we play with a lot of data, media data which are changing our look, how people talk and what they talk about, how data are different. So with this, I would like to go through the slides and give you some insights about insights. The world is creating a lot of big data today. We live in the world where there's a lot of things happening and taking place. And data generated by the media, data generated by the people, data generated by devices, data generated across everything that's happening in the world. And big data create a lot of opportunity, faster decision, but it's also a lot of clutters. Data can be misrepresented, data can be misused, data can change things into positive things, but they can become extremely dangerous in the power of if they're used by individuals who know how to misuse or misguide people. But when we're talking about insight in the new world, and I know that today's conference will be a lot about insights and looking forward how to use transformation, the digital agenda in the communication. And when we're talking about communication, ability to see inside, ability to see beyond what's on the surface, that's the key advantage that will make a big difference between those who has the power and the influence and those who just follow. So the ability to see in time and be inspired by the data and also see beyond. And I think that's what excites a lot of investigative journalists. It also excites a lot of politicians to see beyond. It's insights across geopolitics, local politics, and in the mix. So with this, I would like to go through some of the examples, which is more fun, right? So we start with the mapping. So this is a view on the world export. In the global development, how the geopolitics develops today, it's quite interesting to see who exports the most of the weapons. So looking at it from the geographical perspective, and then if you overlap it with the data that are coming from potential conflict or geopolitical tensions, give you a lot of interesting insight. Here's another one which tells you who is the buyers of the weapons. And this gives you another insight where the potential risk can arise and what opportunity it brings. This slide is about migrations. You can classically, of course, very often see the data that are presented in the tables or in the texts or in the speeches. But what is important to look at them represented on the slide on geo. And you can clearly see where the big numbers are coming from and where big numbers coming to. You can see the big impact on the US, you can see impact on Europe, and particularly Britain. You can see who is the source of the different transformation, and that can give you a little bit of insight why certain geopolitical discussions or discussion about migrations take place in certain countries, and in relation to what countries. So looking at this in dynamics give you additional insights in communicating and structuring your communication. And communication starts with first understanding what you're talking about. This is Ukraine. This is 3G map. And it's interesting, let me see if I have. This is availability. South Korea coverage 99%, Japan 96%. This is 3G in Ukraine today. Again, we thank you, Kyivstar, for sharing some of the information with us. But it gives you an interesting insight how things are covered. And when we're talking in the digital access and availability of the data for people to understand what's really going on, it's really important to understand, do they actually have digital access? And how this digital access will influence the messaging that you're trying to deliver. This is an interesting thing. This is how different students from different cities of Ukraine end up in which universities. You don't have on the map a single city mapped, but you can immediately see where are the cities and how and where people travel. This gives you insight about the students, and the source of this data is social network, used with the geo overlap. So it gives you additional insights. Who is your target audience? How your target audience travel? What's the impact you have? Now let's look at the media, because I think there's a lot of insights on the media which you would like to see. So first thing, it's media group and politicians. So if you look at the presence of the different groups and political forces on the different channels on Ukrainian TV, you would suddenly see that some people have no space, airtime on some channels, and some people have a significant amount. If you look here, there's an opposition block on the Inter. If you look in the comparison on other channels, and then if you look at the presence of Leshko on Ukraine versus other channels. Let's give you insights. You can look deeper and try to understand how and who is engaged with the owners of the channels. That's another one. This is key topics that people discuss. But when you analyze over the time how much different channels talk about different topics, you would suddenly see that Crimean question is actually mostly discussed on 1+1. And almost not discussed on ICTV or STV or Ukraine. You would suddenly see that coal deficit was discussed on Inter and 1+1, but not on other channels. Why? It's a source of messaging? Or is it a source of the chief editor's policy? Now, it gives you a lot of insights, and I think that's when we talk in the digital world of today. Of course, none of this would be possible with the digital analysis, big data, tools, and other things, but it gives you additional understanding what's really going on. When you look at the political figures and how the negativity is created in the digital world, you can actually see this is Valeria Gontareva, and the data are coming from how negative story being broadcasted and disseminated. Just to give you an idea, when you look how the negative story spreads and you look at the website, you can actually identify how a paid website start the wave, and how then it gets replicated through others, and how the negative peaks happen. If you overlap with the other economic events, you suddenly start understanding much more than you anticipate. This is another interesting insight, because the latest digital technology allows people to understand politics and politicians in the different perspective. Let's look how. So, the Cornerstone did analysis of Donald Trump and Barack Obama of their speeches. The first press conference of both, and then you try to understand a number of words, number of significant words or non-significant words, so-called stop words or percentage of stop words, so like the words that are not give no meaning but drive more in kind of the flow of the conversation. Intensity of emotions, we will talk about emotions in a second. And then emotion influence index, and you see how different people broadcast different energy, different messaging in different styles. That's important when you look at the comparison, how people perceive it, how different people broadcast them, with what skills. So this is just one of the examples how you look. This is interesting. I'll just need to explain the numbers. The percentage that you see is the percentage that the person showed emotions in. So let's look, for example, Hillary Clinton in her speeches, 38%, 30% of her speech has been involved emotional speak. Emotional speak, you can't hide. When I talk, I either smile, I show disgust, I'm angry, I'm happy, and it's all written on my face. With the contemporary technology, you can actually read it. So this is what technology reads. And the red thing is how much negative emotions being expressed in the speech. Negative, sadness, anger, dissatisfaction, etc. So this is what's being. So looking through the sum of the figures, you can see interesting dynamics in the speeches, in the messaging, and etc. Of course, it needs to be overlapped with the text and the content, but it gives you an understanding, because when we talk about communications, and I want to mention disruptive digital, right? So it's a disruption, a lot of disruption, but a lot of possibility to understand what political figures talk about, what's their style, and how the audience responds to this. When we talk, another interesting insight is the distribution, how people talk. The TV channels, some of the TV channels, put the speakers, many speakers on the talk show. This is Red Thing and Yulia Tymoshenko on the Schuster Live. This is the best time for the audience. Look when she had most of the time. So, whereas the question, do you have the airtime in the show which is relevant? Look at these people. This time is not popular, so people usually not switch on the channel. So probably that speaker was not very much delivering the message to the audience, or the audience was much smaller. Even though the person was present on the TV show, the possibility of getting the message across was not, probably will not be the same. Emotional scan. So we took Ukrainian journalists, and you can as well analyze when person talks during the TV show, their facial expression express emotions. How much these emotions are related? Do they project sadness or joy or surprising? And in which context? If you overlap with the speech, you can actually understand how much truth is truth in the speech, how much connectivity the speaker has with the audience. That brings technology and this public speaking and engagement to a new, absolutely different level. I'll speed up. It's also on screen presence, and it's also interesting to see. This is Lichtman, he's a host, and normally the host needs to have the biggest share because he's the host at the show. But here, the host is only number 3rd. He gives much more space to just 2 figures. Why? That's a question about the policy of the channel. So finally, we also analyzed how you get your messages across. You can analyze anyone with a lot of data which is available today, but when President Poroshenko was speaking at the Munich Security Conference, we decided to analyze how structure of his speech, how it was disseminated, how much engagement you get followed up. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but there is a technologies that can enable actually engineers or communication people, journalists to understand how you did you actually get message across. And a lot of people look at this effectiveness 28.7%. I can tell you anything about 20 is a success. At average, you will see 3 to 5%. That's statistic. So, and it's also important, you can see the emotional scan on the how much you stop words. This is interesting, 58% stop words, that's a fantastic result. An average contemporary politician used up to 80% stop words. It's meaning water. The last, this percentage, the more content you actually squeeze in your speech. All right. So with this, I just want to leave you with one insight and one message for your conference forum and a discussion. Think about big data. Think about insights you can get with the contemporary data and analysis. Don't scratch the surface. Over the last 3 years, I've seen so many experts who are not experts. I've seen people who are just trying to touch the surface and project opinion. What the world is looking for, deep dive, deep understanding of the things. And then ability to communicate it with message, but also with emotions. Because if you look at a lot of speakers I showed, who are today the political leaders, Majority of them project emotions with content. An ability to project emotions with content, that's a contemporary world. And digital technology allow you to actually to see beyond. So that's me, Dmytro Shymkiv. I'm happy to be here and speak to you. I wish you a great day. I hope I tried to deliver you some glimpses of insight. I don't want to give you a boring intro. I'll leave you with more questions than answers, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.